The movie begins amidst the tranquil cabbage fields of the city named Pune, in Maharashtra, India. A farmer, drenched in sweat and frustration, races through the rows of green, chasing a nimble hare that wreaks havoc on his precious crops. His weathered hands grip a rifle tightly as he takes aim. With a loud bang, the shot echoes across the field, but the screen abruptly fades to black. The sound of a car crash fills the silence, jolting the audience into the realization that the tranquility of this setting is witness to a much larger tale. Elsewhere we see, Akash Saraf sits by his piano, entirely consumed by the splendid melody he is crafting. He lives in a rental NGO apartment for the handicapped people. The room is dimly lit, the only witness to his dedication being his disinterested pet cat, lounging nearby. Akash, who appears to be blind, practices with relentless focus, preparing for an upcoming music competition. The scene shifts to a starkly different world, a luxurious high-rise apartment. Veteran actor Pramod, now past his prime, sits comfortably in his lavish home, scrolling through comments on a video of one of his old movies uploaded to YouTube. His much younger wife, Simi, is in a kitchen, preparing dinner. Their dynamic is intriguing. While Pramod appears nostalgic and mildly self-absorbed, Simi's demeanor suggests restlessness. Pramod, perhaps in an attempt to reconnect, films her cooking, narrating her actions in a tone that mixes affection and pride. The narrative pivots sharply when Akash, while crossing a busy street, is knocked over by Sophie, a lively young woman riding a scooter. Alarmed and guilt-ridden, Sophie helps Akash up and insists on taking him to her father's diner named Franco's. Over lunch, she learns about Akash's blindness and his passion for music. Captivated by his talent, Sophie offers to introduce him to her father, who offers him a gig at his restaurant. Their interaction is light-hearted yet meaningful, and as Sophie drops Akash home, she playfully promises to pick him up for his first performance later that evening. Unbeknownst to Sophie, Akash's blindness is an elaborate ruse. He wears opaque contact lenses, a self-imposed handicap designed to heighten his other senses and refine his piano skills. However, moved by Sophie's warmth and charm, Akash abandons the lenses, though he continues to pretend he cannot see. That night at the diner, Akash delivers a performance so mesmerizing that the audience erupts in applause. Among them is Pramod, who, deeply impressed, invites Akash to perform privately at his wedding anniversary. As Akash's reputation at the diner grows, so does Sophie's admiration for him. Their relationship blossoms, and one fateful evening, after a night of conversation and music, they share an intimate moment at Akash's apartment, solidifying their bond. The story takes a grim turn when Akash arrives at Pramod's apartment to perform for his anniversary. Simi answers the door, her demeanor tense. A nosy neighbor watches from the hallway, prompting Simi to hurriedly usher Akash inside. As Akash begins to play the piano, his heart races. He notices Pramod's lifeless body nearby, his face frozen in an expression of terror. To maintain his charade of blindness, Akash continues to play, even as he spots Manohar, a man hiding in the bathroom. Through a flashback, we learn the harrowing events leading to Pramod's death. Eager to surprise Simi on their anniversary, Pramod had returned home early from a supposed trip to Bangalore. Instead of a warm reunion, he stumbled upon Simi in an illicit affair with Manohar. The confrontation escalated quickly, and in a fit of panic and desperation, Simi and Manohar killed Pramod. Now, as Akash plays, the pair frantically clean up the scene, stuffing Pramod's body into a suitcase and disposing of evidence while Akash feigns ignorance. Deeply shaken, Akash attempts to report the murder to the police but soon realizes the futility of his efforts when he discovers that Manohar is a senior police officer. Knowing he cannot expose the crime directly, Akash fabricates a story about suspecting his neighbor of killing his cat. Manohar, now deeply suspicious of Akash, decides to visit his home under the guise of looking for his lost cat. However, his true purpose is to uncover whether Akash's blindness is genuine or just a clever act. The following morning, news of Pramod's death dominates television channels. Manohar plants a wristwatch belonging to Pramod on a petty criminal, framing him for the murder. At Pramod's funeral, Mrs. DSA, an elderly neighbor, confides in a police officer, claiming she saw an unknown man entering Pramod's apartment on the day of the murder. Her statements cast further doubt on Simi's alibi, but Simi dismisses Mrs. DSA's claims, insisting the woman is mistaken. Meanwhile, Pramod's daughter Dani, from a previous marriage, becomes enamored with Akash's piano skills and asks him to teach her. Akash agrees, but his involvement with the family only entangles him further in the deadly web of lies. Simi, realizing Mrs. DSA's potential threat, murders the woman by pushing her off the apartment ledge, staging it as an accident. Akash, arriving at the scene to give Dani her lesson, witnesses the act but is forced to maintain his pretense of blindness. Overwhelmed by the string of unfortunate events and consumed by a sense of helplessness, Akash reaches out to Sophie, asking her to visit him. Sophie, overjoyed by his call, feels a glimmer of hope, as she had noticed Akash growing distant ever since Pramod's death. In the meanwhile, Simi's suspicions about Akash deepen, leading her to visit his apartment under the guise of concern. She drugs his coffee, hoping to provoke a reaction. Akash, realizing her intent, pretends to spill the drink, but Simi is not fooled. Confronting him at gunpoint, she forces Akash to admit his deception. Cornered, Akash confesses that his blindness was an experiment to enhance his piano skills. Akash pleads with Simi to spare his life, promising to leave for London and keep her secret safe. However, Simi ignores his plea and drugs him, rendering him unconscious. Meanwhile, a neighbor's child, doubting Akash's blindness, secretly records a video of him. Summoned by Akash, Sophie also arrives at this unfortunate time. But her world shatters when the child shows her a video revealing the truth about Akash's fake blindness, leaving her devastated and betrayed. When Sophie arrives, Simi arranges things to look like she and Akash had slept together. Devastated and enraged, Sophie walks away from Akash, her trust shattered. When Akash regains consciousness, he is horrified to discover that the drug Simi gave him has left him truly blind this time. Crushed by his fate, he calls and desperately tries to explain everything to Sophie, but she ends their relationship because of what she saw earlier, leaving him shattered. Later that night, Manohar arrives at Akash's home with the intent to kill him. Akash narrowly escapes but collapses after colliding with a telephone pole, his strength failing him. Heartbroken and vulnerable, Akash finds himself abducted by organ traffickers and taken to a shady abandoned hospital run by the unscrupulous Dr. Swami and his minions Murli and Saku. As Akash lies on the operating table, moments away from having his kidney removed by the corrupt doctor and his minions, he desperately proposes a deal. He offers them valuable information that could make them millions. Intrigued, they abandon the plan to harvest his kidney, and together they devise a scheme to extort money from Manohar and Simi, leveraging the secrets Akash knows about them. To put their plan into action, they kidnap Simi and fabricate a suicide story about her, spreading it through the media. They also call Manohar's wife, revealing the affair between him and Simi. Using this explosive information, they blackmail Manohar, demanding a ransom of 1 crore rupees in exchange for keeping the affair a secret. However, Murli and Saku have their own agenda. They double-cross Akash, tying him up with Simi and planning to take the money for themselves. Manohar arrives at the agreed location to fulfill the ransom demand. There, he shoots Murli, who bleeds heavily. Manohar then tries to chase Saku but is alerted by Murli on time. In response, Saku cuts the power to the elevator, trapping Manohar inside it. In a desperate attempt to get out of the elevator, Manohar accidentally fires his gun. His bullet violently ricochets against the elevator wall and kills him. Meanwhile, Murli succumbs to his wounds in the hospital, while a distraught Saku discovers that the money is counterfeit. In the hospital, bound and terrified for their lives, Simi and Akash struggle to escape. Simi manages to help Akash free himself, and as he removes her blindfold, he begins searching for a way out. Just as he's formulating a plan, Simi breaks free and attacks him. At that moment, Swami enters the scene. Simi strikes him in an attempt to kill him, but Akash overpowers her. Together, They knock her unconscious, tie her up, and lock her in the trunk of a car before driving away. Swami then reveals a shocking truth that Simi has a rare blood type, and her organs are worth millions. He's already made contact with foreign delegates who have buyers lined up for her organs. Moreover, he plans to use her corneas to restore Akash's sight. The scene fades as their car is shown moving forward on an empty distant road. 2 years later, the story fast-forwards. Sophie, now with a new boyfriend, walks through the streets of Krakow, lost in the moment, when a familiar sound stops her in her tracks. To her shock, she sees Akash performing in a restaurant. Overcome with surprise, she hurries inside to find him. After his performance, Akash, with a heavy heart, tells her everything. He recounts how, after he and Swami had driven off with Simi locked in the trunk, she woke up and began banging on the metal. Swami stopped the car to sedate her once more, but Simi, desperate and violent, overpowered him, killed him, and grabbed the wheel. Akash, thinking Swami was still in control, pleaded with him to release her. Sophie listens in stunned silence, her anger fading as she realizes that Akash had no ill intentions. He was only trying to save Simi. Initially, Sophie drops him off, but as the weight of the situation sinks in, her emotions spiral out of control, and she drives off, intent on running him down. Just then, a nearby hunter, aiming for a hare, misses his shot. The frightened hare slams into the windshield, throwing Simi into a panic. The car swerves violently, and Simi loses control, crashing to her death. A poetic callback to the movie's opening scene and a tragic end to a twisted tale. Akash invites Sophie to his performance later that evening, but she hesitates, mentioning she has a flight back to India the next day. However, she promises to try and make it. After hearing Akash's heart-wrenching story, Sophie, torn by her anger towards Simi and her growing sympathy and affection for Akash, tells him he should have taken Swami's offer to regain his sight. Sophie also hints that they should have reunited. The words hang heavily in the air, and Akash, quietly absorbing the weight of her judgment, walks away in silence. After a moment, he uses his cane to knock Akan out of his path. The gesture leaves the audience wondering, has Akash truly embraced blindness, or is it yet another ever-complex experiment of him? Thank you very much for watching, everyone. If you like my work and content, please subscribe to my channel and don't forget to like and share. It really helps us to bring more such content in the future. Have a good one.